After training over 1 million producers around the world, with some working with Drake, Kanye West, Post Malone, Ariana Grande, French Montana, Young Thug, Polo G, Trippie Redd, J. Cole, Kendrick Lamar, Glorilla, we have 3 confirmed Grammy winners and multi-platinum plaque winning producers. After training so many people, I could tell you guys there's one fundamental skill they mess up every time in mixing. And this is what separates the amateurs from the pros. So it's a concept called gain staging. A lot of beginners, even including myself years ago, conflated gain staging with leveling. Leveling is just turning faders up and down or getting stuff adjusted per the channel level, depending on where you guys adjust your volume. But that's not what we mean with gain staging. Think of gain staging almost like space on your memory card, for example. If you only leave a little bit of headroom, okay, from, let's say our beat is hitting at -12, and then we basically don't leave enough room. Let's say we just slam it at 0, which most people do. We don't have enough room to even do stuff. Now, in a perfect world, everything would be gain staged to where when you turn on the plugin, it has the same exact volume on the output. That's just not how music production works in real life. I mean, sometimes it works that way, sometimes it doesn't. But it usually starts with everybody trying to hit past 0 or at 0 to begin with, and they're not leaving enough what's called headroom. So the reason I'm mentioning headroom is because headroom is the thing that we're addressing when we approach stuff with gain staging. Okay, so hopefully I'm making sense. Headroom is the goal. Gain staging is the tool to reach the goal. Okay, so I need room firstly, that's called headroom. But gain staging is understanding not only headroom, it's also understanding the texture and the harmonic we're adding and how loud it's sitting. So it sounds more complicated than what it is. Let's mess with this plugin here. We're redoing the interface for our 808 plugin. So let's turn it on. Now what you can do is go to what's called the distortion area and switch on different types of distortions. Let's turn on the British console mode. Now this is all modeled after analog stuff. So we can drive into this pretty aggressively. And here's where we begin this thing called gain staging, where some transformation of the sound is happening. And I'm going in at one volume, coming out a different volume. And I need to either keep those the same with the process still happening, or the volume needs to change, either one. So let's push into the plugin firstly. Hear how I'm getting more out of the sound. But what we have to do is compensate for the volume change by turning down the output. Okay, so if I bypass this, we don't hear that vroom, vroom. We can still turn it up, but no matter how high we turn up the volume, it doesn't have that ripple effect on it. So this is where gain staging comes into play, is when we start changing the texture or the harmonic structure or something about the sound, okay? And most producers, they just slam into everything. And they don't understand, sometimes you don't want to just slap everything on the master channel or the mix bus because it affects everything. So for example, I'm going to drive the this signal. So now we have that room, room type sound over the beat, but it's affecting all of the instruments. Now that might be the taste that you guys are going for. There's no right or wrong. I'm just telling you guys it's affecting every sound here, including the hi-hats, which is usually the thing that we want to avoid because it becomes from like a tick, 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 tick to more of a sustained hi-hat, and it sounds very scrapey. So what happens if we put this plugin on the 808 itself and not the entire mix? And here's where we have to understand gain staging, because now that I'm putting it on the plugin itself, we still have to make sure the 808 sits at the right spot and not overbearingly loud. So let's push into this. So now we're getting that tone out of just the 808. But as we can see, the 808's screaming, so we need to turn it down. So it still has that vroom, vroom effect on it, but it's not going past, 0. So that's the art of gain staging, is knowing when and where to add the effect without messing up the leveling. Okay, this is why I said there's a difference between leveling and gain staging. Leveling is getting everything to sit at its right priority. So if the bass is the highest priority, the bass is going to be the loudest thing, and then we have all these other instruments. That's leveling. Gain staging is saying to know when to add an effect and to turn it down so that the volume on the output still has that sound sitting at the same priority without going over or superly under. So this is a very different sound. You can just hear that analog attitude on it. So now let me add the plugin back to the group without just putting it on the 808. Let's see what it sounds like now. Sounds very different because now we're adding everything through the one process. So gain staging again is understanding what's happening at what level. Now it can get deeper because gain staging, when we talk about mastering or mixing on the mix bus, you have to know what the signal flow is so that you know. Basically, put it this way. When you have clippers and soft clippers and things like tape emulators, you have to push into them with a volume. So there's different stages of processing. So for that type of plugin, if the soft clipping came before the compressor, then it's squarifying the sound depending on how we push into that soft clipper. If we don't push into the soft clipper, then the sound's not squarified, but we still get the compression. So depending on how you guys set up your signal flow is another understanding of gain staging. And this is where it gets a little complex. So I'm going to use my other plugin called the AI Mastering 3. All right, so this plugin has a multi effects in here. Basically, we're just going to hit the AI master. It's going to master this track for us. Just have to let it run for a couple seconds. So it really pulls out that 808. Now in this plugin, there's different signal flows depending on how we approach this. So I would need to know if I add the smart clip, that's going to come before the limiters, which I have 2 limiters in here. And depending on how you push into this, the plugin itself determines the tone you get out of it. So for example, if I push the entire input, we're going to hit all these other stages of things before we get to the limiter. So it's going to give us a more squarified sound, I'll say. So if I add this clipper, for example, now nothing's going to happen by default until I push the input, okay? Which is, even though I'm turning down the output, it's going through the clipping first before it hits the limiter. So now we're gonna get this. So what most people do is they don't understand you have to have headroom. So going into a plugin like this, if everything was going past 0, you might be clipping unnecessarily when you don't need to actually clip because the input volume is wrong. So you can compensate with the output volume to turn stuff up without hitting that soft clip stage in this specific signal flow. Hopefully I'm starting to make sense as to where when you have all these stages of things happening, you need to organize them so that the textures stack up without you just blowing by 0. So what are the stages so far? We have the 808 going through the BusyWorks Beats 808. And it's getting that specific analog distortion, and then we have it, or harmonic structuring, I'll say, and then we have it going through the AI mastering, which has another layer of clipping. So we're not just getting the sound of the 808 processor on that 808, we're also getting the clipping sound depending on the volume that we're pushing into this mastering plugin from our 808. So what I'm going to do to demonstrate this is solo the 808. So gain staging is understanding that, okay, here's the sound that we already have, which is the 808. Going through this plugin here. Now again, before and after. Here's before, it's sitting at about -13. So if I wanted to be more proper, I turn down the output about 4 more dB. If I'm being like properly gain staging. Okay, so here's before and after the plugin. Here's before. All right, now here's after. but we're hitting at the same volume. Okay, so gain staging is understanding that when I add the AI mastering plugin, if I were to boost the input too high going into that clipper, it's going to add distortions that I don't necessarily want for this specific 808. So sometimes when producers don't understand that their levels have to be a certain way to gain stage into the next plugin, they don't understand the consequences of having the next thing go too aggressive. So I'm going to exaggerate this basically by just turning up the input volume, which is the equivalent of just people turning up their mix entirely too loud, going into the mastering tool. So now it's triggering a clipping stage. Not saying it's wrong, but it's unintended because they didn't gain stage properly. So see how we can get different sounds? Now, if I just turn this up 8 dB on the output, it's not going to give us that type of tone. So that's what gain staging is understanding, is how much volume goes into the next thing to basically go through a different process. Hopefully I'm making sense. But this should be the most evident explanation. I don't have the technical term for it, but the main thing is if I drive the input up 8 dB, we hear it go. But if I turn up the output and not the input and compensate by turning down the input, we're just getting the volume increase. We're not getting the sound running through the clipper, and that's what gain staging is all about. All right, so hopefully I'm making sense, you guys. But that is what I see beginners not comprehend. Really, the way to get better at this is learn more sound design. That's the thing, not mixing, learn sound design. Sound design will show you how to transform one sound into another, and you'll understand why you're doing what you're doing. I think people go through the mixing thing and they don't comprehend it because you're not understanding the source of a sound. Once you get to the source of a sound, it all makes sense. So if you want to learn sound design, go to busyworksbeats.com/premium. If you want any of my plugins like the AI mastering plugin, go to busyworksbeats.com/AI mastering. If you want our new smart compressor, which just go to busyworksbeats.com. You can find all this stuff. We're going to be releasing the new 808 module tonight. We're just working out some of the analog features here. And that should be done by tonight or tomorrow. So thank you guys for watching. It's Game from busyworksbeats.com. Peace out, guys.